Today I want to talk a little bit more about single entity combat, and this is a topic that I've discussed in a number of videos across my channel, but today I wanted to really drill down, talk about a specific concept of single entity combat, which is positioning and numbers. So myself playing the Empire here, let's quickly go over the build. Got a Hellblaster volley gun, we've got a front line of spearmen with shields, couple great swords, and the Sigmar Sons, 3 archers, led by Archlector. We've got a warrior priest on foot and a celestial wizard on horseback. So I don't have any combat single entities. These are all, 2 support characters and a caster, right? And we're up against Kolek, or not Kolek, a regular Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. We've got Big Bird and a Feral Manticore for Wei here, who's playing Warriors of Chaos. Bunch of Forsaken in the front line. We've also got some Marauder Horsemen as well, a couple of Hounds. Reiksguard and Empire Knights protecting the back for me. So you might think that I'm already a pretty significant disadvantage in this single entity combat, in that I have, 3 kind of support characters. Big Bird is sort of a hybrid caster or combat monster. I wouldn't call him necessarily a high-tiered combat monster, but Manticore is just like a cheap combat monster, right? You might think on paper that I'm in trouble, and to a degree I am, but let's see what I can do. Sigmar Sons Greatsword's gonna jump into this frontline combat here. They should trade very well against those Forsaken, but the Forsaken will blend up my spears. That being said, Mirror Guard out on the flank here, then shredded by the Hellblaster volley gun, so that's already generating some great value. As we keep it close here, though, you can see a really nice, I believe that's, Hammer of Sigmar, Shield of Faith being used. We've also used Curse of Midnight Wind to debuff the armor and melee attack of those Forsaken. Still 25 melee attack even after the debuff, but getting cut up by the great swords and the Sigmar Sons there. Archers getting compromised by the big monsters, and the Reiksguard and so forth countercharge in just to even try and pin these monsters in place. Reiksguard even still will fight Sarthrael pretty effectively, given their armor and their, just good weapon strength and charge. The fact that he doesn't have a whole lot of armor. Shaggoth to be a little bit of a different story. But Manticore jumps down and just starts wrecking this Hellblaster volley gun, which already did rack up 684 damage value. Pretty impressive stuff, but big messy blob rush fight. Chaos comes in, bunker busts my line, but the tide is a little bit flimsy in that Forsaken are not super tanky units. This infantry support is going to start to run out pretty quickly. The question is, can they do enough damage beforehand to, turn the battle? And right now, it's looking like potentially that archers are in all kinds of trouble here. Chaos Feral Manticore is being bogged down by the Reiksguard for the time being, which is exactly what I want if I can then potentially get a character into combat with him. But yeah, Warrior Priest still supporting this infantry engagement. The Greatswords are carrying the infantry fight quite well, and especially with the buffs and debuffs, of course. Curse of Midnight Wind is probably one of the most underrated debuffs in the game. Melee attack and armor is amazing, like on 2 for 1 on a debuff there. Puts the Shaggoth down to 40 armor, so the archer's actually able to do some cost-effective damage to him. 0 armor on Sarthrael, and of course the melee attack debuff definitely helps. So here, this is a little bit of what I'm talking about. His 3 single entities are all in a ball here, and because I don't have combat single entities, right, I don't want to fight him all together. Instead, what I want to do is try and fight his single entities when they get isolated. So you see, like, Sarthrael's attack animation kind of pulled him away from the hero blob there, so I jump in with the Archlector to fight him. Then I use the Empire Knights Reiksguard to just tie down the Shaggoth. The Manticore's enraged, so I don't really need to worry about, keeping him occupied. He'll keep himself occupied, except when the enrage drops, then the Celestial Wizard's going to have to come into combat. And thankfully, he does carry Harmonic Convergence, which he can use to juice up his own stats to make him into sort of a demi-combat character. Still only 300 weapon strength, but Reiksguard, Empire Knights come to save the day. They've been juiced up with some prayers as well. Hammer of Sigmar on that, and Plague of Rust on these great swords here, Overcast, so they're down to, 30 armor? Archlector, again, just pushing up and pushing back, Hammer of Sigmar being used there, and the Shaggoth right now looks like it's dropped its attack order, which is a little bit unfortunate. The Archlector on foot comes in with the Hammer of Sigmar and actually dishes out some serious justice against this Creator Demon of Tzeentch. You can see the Archlector comes over as well. And, this is going to be a big issue. Wei making a mistake here, not having the Shaggoth in combat. I don't know if he just didn't fully notice, but this is going to allow me to get a good situation here. You can see I did use, Shield of Faith there. I think I used that Harmonic Convergence earlier. Must have just not caught it on that Celestial Wizard. But we are able to go 3-on-1 very briefly here. The Shaggoth finally notices, smells the blood, is like, okay, now it's my turn. But given that the Shaggoth is relatively weak, he's got about 3,000 HP. And again, I've got these 3 characters all in combat. And basically, this isn't a perfect triangle, but if I get an overhead view, take the banners out, it's a little hard to see even still. But the positioning here of having the Warrior Priest behind the Shaggoth means he's going to be bypassing a good component of the Shaggoth's melee defense and getting more consistent hits. Likewise, we get, you know, another round of prayer buffs to help support these characters. Still all, you know, under 400 weapon strength, but now we get an even better triangle. You can see the Archlector kind of comes over to this position, and now this is ideal. Any direction that the Shaggoth turns, he's going to be having 2 characters in his back arc. And with that great positioning, 3 non-combat characters are able to beat a Shaggoth pretty handily too, without losing a whole lot. I mean, the Archlector got punched in the face a couple times pretty hard, but he was able to survive at the very least. Now he's going to drop some hot soul fire on the Hound Blob that tries to chase him up. We've got another hot soul fire from the Warrior Priest here on the blob of Marauder Horsemen. So all of a sudden, just like that, something that was looking a little bit rough for me, I was not sure about my ability to win that battle. It's looking, well, quite a bit better. Reiksguard, the Empire Knights, coming back from having chased a bunch of units off. Again, coming to save the day, and man, Reiksguard are so cool. Empire Knights too. But Reiksguard in particular, who are going down on the low ground, pushing away those hounds. Such an awesome unit. And yeah, at this point, if I can just keep sustaining, keep pushing things away, the leadership is not looking great for the Warriors of Chaos here. Only 54 HP for Sarthrel, so he's going to have to be careful. Of course, he's unbreakable, so he won't run away, but going to have to be careful not to take too much damage. Sigmar's Sons are also unbreakable, so they may even get a couple hits here. Let's see. We'll kind of keep Sarthrel's HP bar up and see what happens. And, yeah, still staying alive for the time being. My 3 characters are all over there, kind of cleaning up some more Forsaken, Empire Knights, and the Reiksguard pushing through, getting some positioning to try and surround here. Big Bird noms a couple of the Empire Knights, but look at, or sorry, the Sigmar Sons, but this one Empire Knight actually lands a charge and kills him, so big promotion for this guy. He gets to be an Empire Captain now, or whatever, I don't know. Gets a promotion to some kind of hero class. It's too bad we don't have the Grandmasters, the, like, kind of leaders of the knightly orders as a character. I know it'd be a little bit similar to the General of the Empire, but I don't know, maybe it could have some different abilities. I'm a big fan of the Knights of the Empire, and they were able to help kind of win the day here, but at the end of the day, decent damage value spread all around between these 3 characters, and just being able to get the positioning advantages there against those big monsters and not fight them on equal terms. That's really how you win single-entity combat when you are very clearly outclassed, right? Like, Big Bird was able to get a pretty decent amount of damage value as well. Same thing, Shaggoth almost paying for itself, getting pretty close. Manticores are super cost-effective, so that's not hard for them to pay for themselves. Warhound's getting some great damage value in. The Forsaken had a little bit of a rough time. They're a little squishy to use, you know, as a full front line. Maybe better for like a flank support type unit, but Marauders also in this matchup can get run over pretty hard. The Horsemen did decently. It was honestly very, very close. You can see damage values, just most things paying for themselves. Big Bird maybe not quite there, but yeah, my single entities did a great job overall. I'm surprised the Celestial Wizard didn't get more from fighting the Manticore and so on in combat, but I guess a lot of his value did come from the buffs and debuffs there. Yeah, Spearmen with Shields just got absolutely run over except for one. Sigmar's Sons, though, and the Great Swords, one Great Sword in particular, 1100 damage value clean. That is really nice to look at. The Archers, despite getting ransacked, also 2 of them pay for themselves. Empire Knights and Reiksguard. Not one of the Empire Knights, the one Empire Knight, I should say, basically paying for itself. The Reiksguard, not quite, but a lot of their utility comes in pushing units off the battlefield, chasing routing units, and tanking damage as well, getting that shock damage to route. Yeah, Hellblaster Volley Gun got decent value despite getting raided early on in the battle by that Manticore, but very well played away. It was a super close battle, very fun one. And yeah, this is something I've mentioned, like I said, in a lot of previous videos, kind of not completely regardless of quality, and especially given the amount of HP that's left on the combat monster. Like if we go back to this example, that we saw here, had the Shaggoth been, 100% full health and vigor, I don't know, even if my characters were at 100% full health and vigor, I don't think I... maybe. I mean, it's a big maybe because a single entity combat involves a lot of RNG, but I don't know that I would have won. But, given that situation where the Shaggoth is relatively low, and, I have these characters who are still healthy enough to try and contribute, especially kind of the multi-layers of support. This is something that I guess the Empire support characters in particular can do very well. But yeah, numbers usually wins, especially if you have proper positioning, like I try to do there with that little triangle. When you get that triangle around your enemy, you're just getting such consistent hits on every side that regardless of your weapon strength, even with only a little bit of, weapon strength, not a whole lot of which is AP, 120 AP there, probably 100 AP, a 90 AP on the caster. Yeah, just really not amazing damage value, you might think, but I mean, only 70 armor on the Shaggoth, right? 44 melee defense. This is another thing, too. Recently, they went through and nerfed the melee defense and buffed the melee attack of a lot of the high-tier combat monsters, and that made this kind of interaction even stronger for the numbers side, where these kind of non-combat characters in numbers and with positioning can win against these big, scary monsters. And this is true of, of any faction, I would say. This example in particular is probably strong because of the multi-support abilities, but I wouldn't say that the Celestial Wizard is necessarily a super strong choice to begin with. You could probably get, just as good of value, if not more, from something like, say, Shadows, even Death. A lot of different lores could potentially benefit this well. Fire, if you take the Banner of Eternal Flame on this guy, then you get tons of extra damage from that, from Kindle Flames and so on. So there's some different things to consider specifically for the Empire, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Like, you think about, I don't know, Greenskins. This guy right here, the Goblin Big Boss, doesn't see nearly as much use as he used to, and I think that's a little bit of a shame, because you look at him on paper, and on the Spider, without any abilities, he's only 500 points, which is really cheap. 60 charge is awesome. Also does poison, has decent combat stats, not the most HP in the world. 360 weapon strength is kind of okay. It's not good, but but again, if you consider, say you have like 2 of these guys plus then a caster lord running around, like maybe you have a Gabo Great Shaman, especially on the Spider, that's even more obvious. But like Wurzag, for example, on the Pig, he is pretty squishy, so you'd have to be a little bit careful about this, but maybe you can gang up on a big monster with these 3, right? Or pick any faction of any. Skaven are a really good example of this, given that the Assassin, like, on paper, he has great attack. 60 attack is awesome. Everything else is just kind of meh, like less than 400 weapon strength, only 40 charge bonus. He is pretty fast for a foot character, but he's squishy as well, less than 3,000 HP. But, given that you can take 2 of them plus, like, Skrulk or, whatever else, even just take 1, take, Snitch, Master Assassin, whatever. The fact that it's just an extra single entity fighting in that combat, it makes a pretty big difference. Another reason, and this is kind of the last point for today, that the Manticore summons is so strong is it adds another single entity, or any single entity summon. Manticores are just the most common, right? But this can be true also of the Cygor summon for the Beastmen. Any single entities that you can add to that equation to stack things in your favor, it helps, and especially for a faction like Beastmen, where you are at risk of being monster mashed by certain factions, having the ability to add these extra single entities into that fight is a very powerful thing. So I guess in conclusion, those cheap kind of support single entities, that's one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of them. Well, even not support, but just like a basic, like Empire Captain on foot with nothing, only 350 points, right? So it's just another single entity to add to that equation. So even if you're not playing a faction that has strong monsters, I still recommend you try and max out your single entities, just because in that equation, if you have more single entities, you use them correctly, you'll probably win. That's my video essay for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.